A lot of people want to read classic books, but they're afraid they're going to be difficult. A lot of these books have dense language with long chapters, confusing plots, and sometimes long passages of historical context before we really get to the plot. And to be fair, a lot of classics are not easy, but not all of them are so inaccessible. Today, I'll share some very accessible classics that are short, they're clear, they're gripping and fun and emotionally direct, and really surprisingly easy to read. So if you want to get into classic literature, but you don't know where to start, here are 5 classic books that are actually easy to read. Now the first book here is one that I love. I've read this many times. It's called The Call of the Wild by Jack London. It's one of the great books if you really want a classic that moves quickly. It's an adventure story, a survival story, but in many ways it's also this kind of mythical adventure story about instinct and nature and transformation that happens in hard situations. It follows Buck, who's a domesticated dog, who's taken from a comfortable life and thrown into a harsh wilderness in the Yukon. It's got direct language, the chapters move, the story maintains momentum all the way throughout, which is important. And because it's grounded in action and atmosphere, it doesn't feel like homework. The Call of the Wild. Now the second book here is one you've heard of before, and people have strong opinions about this one. This is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now I know, but hold on with me for a second here. This is one of the most commonly recommended classics. And for once, I think that recommendation actually makes a lot of sense when you're talking about accessibility because it's short, it's stylish, it's readable. It really is a beautiful book. It's beautifully constructed, and you don't need to understand every symbol or every layer of the kind of American dream element of the story to enjoy it, because at its heart, The Great Gatsby is really about longing. It's about wanting something or someone or some version of a life that maybe isn't so real, but you want it so badly that that dream begins to consume you. And we can relate to that, right? And because the prose is so precise and elegant, it's a great entry point into classic literature, and it really feels literary without being inaccessible, impossible to read. Now, I know The Great Gatsby can be a slightly polarizing pick. A lot of people read this and say, but I hated all the characters. And honestly, that's fair, it makes sense, except the characters, well, they're not exactly people you want to spend a weekend with, but that's also kind of the point. They're not meant to be likable characters. Even the narrator, Nick Carraway, is not particularly likable. The novel's not asking you to admire them, it's asking you to see through them, to see through the eyes of the characters, through the glitz and the glamour and the money and the parties and the performance, and see the longing and the emptiness that's beneath all of that. So if you want kind of a famous, short, beautifully written Jazz Age classic, you could start with The Great Gatsby. But if you want something a little less obvious, honestly, this is a lot funnier. You could go with Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Loos. This is a really great book as well. It's short, sharp, like I said, very funny, hilarious, and a lot more important than a lot of people realize. It really gives us another angle in the Jazz Age, not just the tragic dream of Gatsby, but also the comic performance of glamour and money and desire and social climbing at any cost. It's extremely easy to read. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Loos. Now the third book here is one you've probably heard of as well, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is another book many people encounter in school, which sometimes I think makes people assume it's going to feel like an assigned book. But if you read it outside the classroom, I promise it's very accessible, it's very enjoyable. It really is a coming-of-age story at its heart about social justice or injustice, childhood, and moral courage in the face of evil, seeing a community more clearly as you become older. A lot of these themes are really relevant. The voice is warm and immediate, and because so much of the story is filtered again through childhood memory, it has that natural readability that a lot of classics don't always have, so this is a great book to read as well. And a quick note before we keep going, if you want to read more deeply alongside a thoughtful community, I'd invite you to join my book club. So we just started it this month, but each month we're reading a children's classic and one adult literary work alongside that. There will be reading guides and discussion threads and member voting and lots of live conversations. as we get to the end of the month and we talk about the books that we're reading, and this month we're reading A Gentleman in Moscow and The Wind in the Willows. The goal is really simple here, to just slow down, read great books, and explore the transformative power of literature together. You can find the link to join in the description if you're interested, but let's get back to the list. So the next book on the list here, number 4, this is one of my favorites when I was a child. I read this classic many times. It's actually much shorter. This book is the classic plus a number of short stories included in it. And you know this story even if you've never read it before. Any guesses? It's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. This one is very short. It's atmospheric as well, which is one of the things I think that makes it accessible because it's focusing on the atmosphere, much easier than people expect it to be. Most people know the basic idea that there's a man with 2 selves. He has this kind of like respectable public-facing version, and he has the darker hidden self. And that's an element of this, but the original story is much deeper. It's still worth reading because it's not just that monster story. It's about secrecy and temptation and repressed emotions and the divide in the human soul. Really great ideas. And because it's so short, it's one of the best classics to read if you want that satisfaction of finishing something really important without having to commit to 600 pages or 1,000 pages of reading like Don Quixote or something. So before I get to the final book here, I should note that this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. There are so many other great classics. A number that came to mind when I was thinking up this list were Animal Farm by Orwell, because it's very short and clear and accessible. Of Mice and Men by Steinbeck is wonderful. It's devastating in spite of its brevity. Also The Pearl by Steinbeck's another great place to start. The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway. It's very profound, very simple story, but very deep. And there are so many more. So the key is to find one that really strikes a chord with you and to really give it a go. Now the final book is one that I actually can't find right now. I know I have it, but that's not so important. The book is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is one of the best classics for people who want something that has some meat on the bones, some elegance and depth, but it's not like an impenetrable read. Because Wilde is so sharp and funny and quotable and readable, and it's just a great premise as well. The idea is basically you have this beautiful young man who remains untouched outwardly by age and corruption, because all of that goes onto his portrait. His portrait bears his marks of moral decay. It's a Faustian story, so it's settled in a very ancient literary tradition, but it's also a book about beauty and vanity and temptation and influence and art and the cost of living without a moral center. And it's super entertaining, as Wilde always is, with great dialogue and characters that are super memorable. And it's gothic, which is a plus as well. So it's a great story, keeps moving, and highly, highly worth reading. So if you've been avoiding classic literature because you think it's going to be too difficult, don't start with the hardest book. Start with something that's readable, like The Great Gatsby or The Call of the Wild or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Start with something that resonates with you. If any of these stories struck a chord, start there. If something else did, you can start there, but know that not every classic book has to be this big ado. It can just be fun. And the right first or 100th book can honestly change the way that you see classic literature overall. So go for it. And I'm curious, which classic book did you find surprisingly easy to read? Let me know in the comments. And until next one, happy reading, and God bless.